Hi, what's up, everyone? Thank you guys for joining us for another great video meetup. I'm going to be your host for today. My name is Justin Ong. We've got a great show for you guys today. We're going to be learning all about HPE Cloud Volumes, and for more on that, we have two fantastic experts for y'all today. Let's go ahead and start off with a round of introductions. Coming to us first from HPE, Ms. Diane Gonzalez. Diane, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. Diane, thanks for joining us. Do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do for HPE, please?
Yes. Again, my name is Diane Gonzalez, and I'm the Principal Technical Marketing Engineer for HPE Cloud Volumes. And I do quite a bit of things. A lot of course, spreading the word about what HPE Cloud Volumes is, but I do also a fair amount of customer solutions work and general, I guess you could say, engineering in the ecosystem, in the cloud ecosystem.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go to our next panelist, also from HPE, Mr. Nick Dyer. Nick, welcome to the show today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Nick, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do for HPE?
Absolutely. So I'm part of a field CTO team that cover many different products and technologies. I focus on Nimble and Cloud Data Services, helping the field and partners and our customers work out what solutions are right for them, as well as how to integrate it into their current environments today.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for joining. I think it should be a really enlightening and educational time today. Dan, I'd like to just go ahead and start with you, and we'll kick things off at the most logical place. And can you tell us exactly what is HPE Cloud Volumes for those who aren't familiar with it?
Yeah, so HPE Cloud Volumes is an enterprise-grade set of multi-cloud services. It's a portfolio product. When we talk about HPE Cloud Volumes, we're actually talking about several services that we have running within the portfolio, but it's for storing and managing data in public clouds. It encompasses several use cases, quite a bit of use cases that we target with this particular portfolio. Obviously, hybrid cloud is an excellent place to start. And that's because we are able to seamlessly move data from on-premises to the cloud through our replication service that's part of our HPE Cloud Volumes block. We're also able to provide storage to cloud compute as well. And we're able to do that low latency, cost efficient. We're able to provide it across multiple clouds. We service Azure, AWS, and GCP or Google will be generally available here in the next month. It's in private beta now. We have the ability to migrate data, like I said, from on-premises to the cloud with native replication. So if you have HPE Nimble storage on premises, we're able to natively move that data to the cloud, but that's okay. We're also able to move data to the cloud from other ISVs and other storage products as well. Those services will not be available completely until a little bit in the future, but that is something that we're working towards. But right now with Nimble storage, we have the ability to seamlessly move that data to the cloud, and we can obviously present it to any one of the hyperscalers. That's kind of the gist of what the service is. But the best part is when we talk about the workflows that this services, that all of these services enable, and how it's able to be managed, and more importantly, how we're able to fit it into cloud native workflows as well. Right, Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add on to that, it is a HPE storage service. So we're not presenting cloud VMs or cloud operating systems. We are truly a enterprise grade storage service that's consumed as a service, and customers can buy the service in the US in either the US East or US West locations, and it's also available now and generally available in London as well as the Dublin, Ireland region for European customers, with more regions coming online very shortly.
Great. So the next question, I believe Diane touched on this a little bit, but for a lot of organizations that are looking into not just the cloud, but specifically building out a hybrid solution, potentially even a multi-cloud strategy, what exactly does HPE Cloud Volumes mean for these types of organizations?
That's a really good question. So I talk to customers and prospects every day across the general storage portfolio ecosystem, and Nick does as well. So, we each have our focus points, but we talk to general customers and consumers across the portfolio pretty much every day. And when we're talking about hybrid cloud or cloud native strategies, there's a couple of pain points that always come up. First one's going to be, how do I get to that cloud first or hybrid cloud environment? How do I take how I'm running day-to-day now and translate that into a hybrid cloud? How do I ensure my data? How do I have my governance? Even simple things like, how do I move my data, right? And then once I'm in the cloud, how do I then leverage my data in my cloud-first workflows? And so when we're talking about where Cloud Volumes fits into that piece, it really is the answer to several of those pain points, right? So when you're talking about moving data to the cloud, there's always a question of re-architecting, right? Or applications, data or applications. Very seldom, by the way, are enterprises that we're talking to today talking about moving applications without moving a subset of their data. Applications can actually be moved fairly easily. Service endpoints can be remapped. There's some architectural overhead that needs to be done, but the real pain point is that data, that gravity that data has. And so with Cloud Volumes, the first thing that we're able to offer out of the bat is we can get your data to the cloud, right? And we're able to do it in band, meaning you don't need to have some separate piece of equipment. It's not a complicated setup. It's actually as a service, the exact amount of data that you want to move, and you have complete control over the data once it is moved to the cloud, right? So that's the first thing. We're able to help get your data up there. And the next thing that we're able to do is, because we're able to move the data as it is on premises to the cloud, right? We're also able to then leverage infrastructure as a service deployments in the cloud to seamlessly bring up the applications for the customer as well. Now, again, that's work, like Nick said, that the customer's doing. They're leveraging our service, our storage service to do it. But the beautiful part is they don't have to learn something new. Infrastructure as a service is pretty much how you run on premises. There's some cloud caveats that you have to kind of wrap your head around, but for them, it's the same thing, different day, right? So imagine a SQL server that you've got running on-prem. Let me just kind of switch over to a slide that will really bring this home. So when we're talking about migrating applications to the cloud, I'm going to start out with two of the ones that we're most commonly hearing about, because they're the scary ones. They usually have some sort of financial data, some sort of personnel data. Maybe they're the backbone of an SAP system, you name it. And so SQL, Oracle, very common enterprise applications. And customers are looking at how do I take any subset of this application or this data to the cloud. So perfect example to start with. I've got this running on premises, right? I'm able to, again, in band, no external data mover required. I'm able to move this as part of the data protection template of the application itself, of the volumes itself. I'm able to seamlessly replicate that data to HPE Cloud Volumes, our block service, right? Once it's there, right, that there's a couple things that we've done for the customer. Number one, if the customer's just interested in having a secondary copy offsite, but they don't maybe have the extra capacity or the extra compute or the extra storage at the secondary site, they've now seamlessly moved this to their secondary site, now being the cloud. And at that point, they can spin up the data however they need and attach it to cloud compute. This replication, by the way, whether from on-premises to the cloud or from the cloud back on-premises, is without egress, right? The data is securely moved as well through an SSH tunnel. There's no extra software or hardware needed, all right? And if you need to fail the data back, in this particular line here, we're looking at a DR or a backup to the cloud, but let's just say it happened to be a DR scenario where we had to promote this data, present it to some sort of compute. Let's say you're presented to Azure Compute, and now you're ready to fail back on-prem. You can actually start that process of replicating data back on-prem immediately, and then when you're ready to cut over, you can just promote the on-premises data set. But here's the cool part. All of that happened without egress. And as we know, when you're moving data out of the cloud at any point, there's usually an egress cost. But since we own this pipe, and actually we've created the tunneling, from the on-premises environment to our environment, we're able to offer that service without egress. Now, let's look at a more common use case, because that was kind of like the world's on fire use case. Here's what I hear a lot more of when I'm talking to the customers. I want to take a particular workflow or something that I'm doing that's costing me money on premises, and I want to take it to the cloud because A, I don't need that environment up and running all the time. Here's a perfect example. Imagine you're, I don't know, a retailer, and it's Christmas time, and you need more web front ends, and you need to be able to hold the transactions of those purchases in some sort of data set. Maybe you need to spin up more compute to receive the transactions or the purchases. Right? You still need a schema or a data set. You want to have a place to do that. You don't necessarily want to invest the capital to have that infrastructure lying around all year while you're waiting for Christmas. Here's where the cloud's a perfect example of something that you can leverage the cloud compute for, right? So again, we're able to replicate that data to the cloud. And at that point, it's not a failover. We can just instantly spin up a clone and present that data to AWS, Google, or Azure Compute. We have the secondary workload now in the cloud with an up-to-date copy of either primary data or schemas, and we're off to the races. What's another use case for this? Let's say you want to do your CI/CD pipelines in the cloud, right? Or you want to do your testing in the cloud, or you want to do your DevOps in the cloud, analytics in the cloud. Any workflow that you can think of where it is dynamic in nature, where you want to spin up, spin down, but the data is important, perfect use case for the cloud. You still get to keep the authoritative data set on premises where you have all your governance, right? Where you're able to meet your SLAs. Nobody says that the data set that you present to cloud compute has to be identified, right? So we have customers, for example, that are taking their data set, cloning it, attaching it to compute in a DMZ, for example, and making sure it's a de-identified data set. So once they clone it, they run a de-identification script. And at that point, it's available to third-party entities for data mining and data warehousing, right? So there's the use cases here are endless, but the core service that we're talking about here and the core abilities we're talking about here is not just being able to move the data, but present the data to the cloud. And we also have some multi-cloud use cases. Nick can talk about those too.
So some things that I really like to highlight on this slide that are of real use is that when customers, CIOs, CTOs, IT directors, IT managers are considering cloud, the real catch is, how do I get the same governance in the public cloud that I do on-prem, or how do I get the same service availability? Or it could even be things like, how do I get the same level of data protection and recovery purposes? And how do I get that across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud? Because I'm going to consume different clouds for different use cases. Cloud Volumes as a fundamental feature set brings the same experience of managing on-premises storage into the public cloud. So things like snapshots, cloning, replication, data mobility, all the things that we've been doing for many years on premises, we can now do the same thing in public cloud. And that's the main experience here, is being able to abstract that away from the hyperscalers from a storage perspective, and then presenting the right storage at the right time to the right cloud compute when is needed. So therefore, you're not paying for the performance of that cloud until you need to switch it on and you need to actually deliver the performance that you need.
Right. And then, so Diane, my next question for you, I believe, for a lot of folks, the main question would be this: all this sounds great, but obviously, cloud is not just a ubiquitous term. There are specific cloud providers, and can you talk a little bit about what cloud providers that HPE is currently partnering with that are making the service available to them?
Right. So we started off with AWS and Azure, right? And then we moved on to Google. Google is a fun one to talk about because not only do we offer kind of infrastructure as a service for, let's call them traditional applications in this particular context to Google. And again, that's going to be generally available here in November. But at the same time, what we are able to do, and this is a strong partnership that we have with Google, is we're able to fit into their Anthos platform. Essentially, we're able to provide persistent storage for containerization. And we actually did a Spiceworks video on that. So if anybody's interested who's watching this one, check that one out because it really dives deep into that particular partnership. But we have the ability to present data to all three of the major hyperscalers, so AWS, Google, and Azure. And we're able to interface not just from an infrastructure as a service type of scenario, but also if you look at some of the platforms that are available, like the enterprise Kubernetes engines that we have available, the managed ones, we're able to interface with those as well. And so and one other thing to note too, it's not only are we able to interface one-for-one to one of the hyperscalers, but we're also able to interface across them. So imagine a situation where a customer is going cloud native. That means they're getting rid of their on-premises environment. Let's say they choose Azure as their starting point. That's not actually a far-fetched idea because Azure has some very good a services portfolio available for establishing a hybrid cloud environment. And that makes sense because most customers are running Active Directory and DNS and things like that. Mm-hmm. So, starting off with Azure, now I've got an enterprise that is going cloud first. I've chosen Azure as my starting point, but wait a minute. I really like the APIs that AWS offers. They're deep. I've got a lot of functions that I can leverage. And my DevOps team happens to have their own operating budget. And maybe for them and what they want to do in this particular case, AWS is a better fit. Now, how do I get my data from Azure to AWS? Guess what? We can do that. We're able to not just simultaneously present the data, but if we needed to present clones of that data, so imagine a situation where my primary data set is running in Cloud 1. In this case, let's just say it's Azure. But my DevOps environment needs that data set or the schema or any portion of the data set in Cloud 2. Let's say it's AWS. On the Cloud Volumes side, I can clone it and present it instantly. And by instantly, I mean seconds, right? Mm-hmm. I'm able to take that exact data set, present it to AWS, and now it's available for my developers. Let's say my developers need to clone that several times. Well, they can, right? So at all points in this game, we're able to not just duplicate the data, all those enterprise data service features that Nick brought up, right? The things that you think of that generally traditionally run on premises. You're able to do that not just in one cloud, but across clouds. So we're able to do multi-cloud deployments. And let's not forget that should we need to take data from the cloud back, we can do that as well without egress. And the presentation of the data from cloud to cloud is also without egress. To give you an idea, this is something that's easily something you can look up. Every cloud provider has egress charges. I believe in US East, if you want to transfer data out of AWS, for example, it ends up being at 9 cents a gig, right? So in our example, let's say that the primary infrastructure was running in AWS, but we wanted to use Google for some sort of other purpose. Transferring data at that point from one cloud provider to another to leverage whatever feature set is best in class to the customer, right? Because it's all about what the customer wants to do. And interesting note here, if you look at any of the latest analyst reports, analysts are anticipating most enterprises will be leveraging an average of 4 public clouds. Think about this, not 1, 4. And there's a reason for that. And that's because each one of them has great strengths, and some do things a little better for the customer, meaning for whatever use case the customer has, they want to have the ability to choose that best-in-class service. So there is a room, it's not arbitrary. Customers aren't just moving data willy-nilly. It is there for a reason. They may choose Cloud 1 because it does a particular thing better from their point of view. They may choose Cloud 2 because of the price point, but the point is they're choosing multiple clouds. And rather than moving the data slowly across the pipe at a charge of 9 cents a gig or more, depending on the region, we are able to seamlessly present it to any cloud instantly without egress, right? So there's lots of workflows that we open up at that point with that ability. Okay.
And just to add to that, the thing that I quite like about this is you have a single common interface to manage the storage for all 3 hyperscalers. So now you're not managing AWS storage in one way and Azure storage for another way, and working out what the costings are for it, you've now got one GUI or one API set or one command line set to do everything that you need. And the other thing I liked about Diane's example about taking clones and having a clone from Cloud 1 running in Cloud 2, well, the great thing about that is I can have different performance characteristics on the different clones. So I could have on Monday to Friday a performance characteristic running on the production, and then on the clone that I spin up on a Saturday afternoon for a dev test workload, I could have that bursting all the way up on a performance profile. Once it hits midnight, dial it straight back down again. But I'm not locked to the capacity and the performance of that profile. So I can dial it up and dial it down exactly when I need it and be billed for exactly how much I consume.
And to build on to what Nick just said as a value add, from capacity and performance perspective, we're not locked at all. So traditionally, the hyperscale storage for block storage in particular is tied in a capacity to performance ratio. And that's because they have a proprietary scale-out storage system on the back end. So in order to achieve more capacity, you're going to need more. Achieve more performance, you're going to need more capacity. There's a hyperscaler. There's a couple hyperscalers that, like Azure, for example, has their Ultra SSD offering that's still in private beta, but is coming out. That's going to allow a little more flexibility. AWS has provisioned IOPS SSDs, but those are still tied together in a capacity string. So you can manipulate IOPS, but it's up to a certain range based on the capacity. With Cloud Volumes, that's completely decoupled. So if you wanted a 10 gig volume with 50,000 IOPS, guess what? You can create a 10 gig volume with 50,000 IOPS. And to Nick's point, if you wanted to clone a volume, it can have 300 IOPS, for example, because I don't necessarily need the production type of IOPS for my development. So it's not just the clones that have that decoupling, it's production data sets as well. It really is choose the capacity and the performance as you need. And it's not static. You can go up and down.
And then Diane or Nick, could you guys talk, is there a target market of customers that you guys think would be ideally suited for the solutions that we're talking about today?
I think from my side, we're seeing a lot of interest from a complete wide variance of customers. A lot of mid-market customers which are investigating how to use public cloud, and that could be, should I be going full public cloud and switching off my production data center? I'm maybe considering doing Azure for disaster recovery, for example, but I've got concerns about being locked into Azure. We're having a lot of those conversations at the moment. A lot of our current customer set that have a dual data center design as a primary in disaster recovery. We're having lots of conversations about switching off disaster recovery sites and using Cloud Volumes as a disaster recovery target, because it gives them that on-premises experience of being able to manage it without having to refactor applications and being able to bring them online when they need them. So from that point of view, they quite like that experience. However, we are having many conversations with large enterprises because typically those companies have already done this, and they've already found out a lot of the rat holes and a lot of the gotchas that you can end up getting into when running this in true production. I met with a customer roughly a month ago who's going all in with Azure. They're doing Azure Stack on premises, multi-million-dollar contract for that workflow. But that's only 30% of their data. And there's 70% of their data that has performance issues or security concerns or governance issues that they're not able to consume native public cloud storage for. And when they saw what Cloud Volumes block and the services that we can deliver for them, can deliver whilst not giving up control and security and governance, that allows them to address the other 70% of their data set while still being able to run the data on premises and having the data mobility. That was I think the big ticket for them. And mobility is absolutely one of the biggest feature value points of Cloud Volumes as an overall service. It's not a one-way mobility migration. It is truly the way of moving data back from on cloud to on premises and on premises to cloud, without any egress charges, which is the big kicker. So that's my experience. It really is mid-market all the way up to enterprise. Public sector customers are very, very interested in this service as well, primarily as to, again, the governance as to what they're going to bring from that experience. Diane, anything to add?
Yeah, so for me, I think the one that was most interesting, I think you hit the nail on the head with the enterprises and data governance being a big key. The other one that to me was very interesting was just the sheer number of customers that we talk to that want to just back up to the cloud, but they don't want to do it out of band with a data mover. They don't want to do it to object because they want to be able to recall it faster than an object model would allow them to do. And they want it in a place where theoretically, should they put it into this particular pocket, let's call it a pocket in the cloud, they want to be able to then choose to either bring it back on premises or into any of the clouds. And so, you're talking to them and you're hearing this as a use case and it's like, wait a minute, that's exactly what we do. Let me show you what we do, right? So it's kind of interesting that we actually built a service that I often get led by customers rather than the other way around. I walk into an environment to talk about cloud, general cloud, whatever the customer's concerns may be, because at HPE we actually have quite a big cloud portfolio. But I go in to talk about the cloud ecosystem and how to help the customer with pain points. And as they're talking, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, this is exactly what we do. Let me show it to you. And that's essentially, I want a hot backup space. I don't just want a place where my data can die. And by die, I mean it grows long in tooth. It's out there. It's an archive, right? I may recall it. Maybe I might get some sort of notice, legal notice, where I have to recall a large subset of data, but I can take my time with that. But the reality is I want a place where I can put my data that's not costing me in data center costs, but is still agile. And that's what with Cloud Volumes Block we can actually offer. We still have customers that want the next tier. So not quite, it's kind of like the Goldilocks principle. So it's kind of, I want a hot backup space that I can immediately do dynamic workflows from. Cloud Volumes Block all the way, right? And then I've got an archive need. And we have actually a product in our portfolio under the Cloud Volumes business unit, HPE Store Once Cloud Bank. So that's an archive product. Then there's this Goldilocks in between, this kind of, I still want something that I can back up to. Maybe it doesn't need to be as hot or as mobile as Cloud Volumes Block. Doesn't need to be as cold as Cloud Bank. What can you give me? And we're actually working on that. And I think folks that are looking for that particular use case are going to be pleasantly surprised in the short term. But we're essentially working with our portfolio products to develop that kind of sweet spot backup space where you are backing up to the cloud, but it's not as difficult to withdraw data from it as perhaps an archive, an object store archive would be. It's more mobile like Cloud Volumes Block, but it has a price point that is much more beneficial to the customer that is really interested in a true backup kind of use case. So not archive and not DR, but more of a backup use case. So we have that coming down the pipe too. That's another one that to me has been really interesting. Everybody thinks, and I used to be of the same mind too. If a customer wants to move data to the cloud for the purposes of backup, then they're really not looking to want to recall it at all. And the actuality is it's the exact opposite. Customers want to move data to the cloud. They want the same agility that they would get running a backup appliances on premises, meaning I want to get that data quickly. I don't just want it to go to the cloud to kind of die a slow death until I don't need it anymore 20 years from now. So.
We're also hearing from a lot of customers that because with Cloud Volumes Block and the services we offer there, that's today the mobility is locked into our Nimble platforms. So we're hearing lots of customers going, hey, that's great for Nimble, but I'm looking at Primera, our new mission critical storage platform, or hey, I've got 3PAR, or I've got a load of other vendors' storage technologies which I use with Veeam on top backing up. How can you give me that mobility away from a storage platform? How can you give me that mobility into the cloud whilst being storage array agnostic? So this portfolio will also allow us to bring data mobility into the cloud as a backup service, but also then you can restore that data into the Cloud Volumes block service should you want to go into production with it. So it's all about fracturing the infrastructure. Go on, Dan. What was that? Sorry.
I was just going to say, reiterate your point, from several ISVs, not just Nimble Storage, from other storage products in our portfolio as well as ISVs. So, one last thing I want to add here because it's important. The other thing that we definitely hear of from a cloud ecosystem perspective is microservices and containerization. Don't want to spend too much time talking about that on this one because we did an entire Spiceworks video on it already. But the reality is that as customers are moving to the cloud, they want to build cloud native. They want to build in a very microservices kind of architecture. And the important point to note there is that when it comes to managing data for containers, we have the ability to do that with Cloud Volumes just like we do on premises. We have a Flex Volume driver. We also have a Docker Volume plugin. And then we also have CSI driver integration that's coming out for our Cloud Volume service, which means that whichever container orchestration that you're interested in going with, whether it be Docker, Swarm, Kubernetes, Mesospheres, right? We pretty much have the ability to manage the persistent data on the back end, which makes it a very comfortable solution for customers that are already starting to build cloud native on premises. So now we're not only able to migrate the services, we're able to migrate the data that's underneath those services, those microservices, and we're able to present them across clouds. So same benefits that you would get for your traditional monolith applications apply into containerization. And once you add that containerization story piece to the mix, it really becomes powerful because applications are a little bit stickier when they're not containerized. And I think containerization is really the future of where cloud is going, right? So.
And to add on to Diane's point, it wouldn't be me if I didn't give a shout out for vVols as well. So a lot of customers have been asking about, so if I'm a VMware house, how do I get my data into the cloud? Because I'm storing everything within, VMFS file systems and data stores. What can you give me that's going to give me that per application control of separating my data away from my applications? That's what VMware vVols are for. HPE has now been announced as the market leader for vVols. We're incredibly proud of that. If you're not using, if you're a VMware customer using Nimble or 3PAR, and you're not using vVols on vSphere 6 and above, you need to take a look at them. They're really, really cool. But vVols allows you to fragment that away from the application. So you've got your data sets, you've got your operating system drives. You can now have the profile and the policy of your vVols replicating without any VMware formatting. So it's the native operating system format. You can replicate a particular type of data set to the cloud using Cloud Volumes and Cloud Volumes block. We can then connect that data set. So it could be a SQL log and DB file that you're running on-prem. You can replicate that up to the cloud using Cloud Volumes. You can then natively connect that MDF and LDF file directly to the cloud compute of your choice across any cloud provider with no refactoring, no reformatting, and no concerns about, is this going to work? It's absolutely end-to-end certified, and we know it's going to work.
All right, next question. Diane, I know that InfoSight is a key part of HPE's offerings and strategy. Can you talk about how that is involved in the Cloud Volume solution that we're talking about today?
Yeah, so InfoSight, for those that don't know, is our AI-driven analytics platform where we collect thousands of data points daily from our systems that are in production, whether they be Nimble Storage or 3PAR. And we're leveraging that data to proactively, this is the AI part, to proactively give customers the metrics that they need for planning and prioritizing their data and their growth. But at the same time, we also proactively fix problems, like literally proactively fix problems and recommend fixes even before the customer recognizes that there's a problem on the horizon, right? So, and from a platform perspective, there's a lot of power there. Where it ties into Cloud Volumes is, remember, the customer is actually not running an array or anything like that when it comes to Cloud Volumes. They're leveraging a service that we provide. But guess what is backing the service we provide? InfoSight Analytics. So now we ourselves, we eat our own dog food because it is that good of a service. We are able to leverage that information to not only ensure the stability of the product service that we're giving the customer, but then we're able to immediately give them information about their consumption, their cost utilization. They're able to report on that. They're able to understand the performance that they have in their volumes and how it's impacting their applications, right? So I think Nick brought up this use case earlier, and it's totally true. So because all Cloud Volumes is backed by InfoSight, when you're in the portal, you can go to a particular volume and you can see the trend for performance for that volume immediately. So now imagine a situation like Nick said, where you know that you're going to be running a job once a week. And in that particular day that you're running that job, you're going to need 40,000 IOPS, right? You've got the trend, you've got the chart. It's very easy to either schedule, because Cloud Volumes, it's a cloud service, which means that we have the ability to interface with native cloud APIs, right? And we have our own API. So you can imagine running something like functions as a service in AWS to at midnight, the night of the job, whenever it is that you need this particular IOPS profile, you kick off an API job that is, or an API call from this job that essentially does one thing. It goes out to that volume and it increases the IOPS. And then when the job's done, another function spawns off and it decreases the IOPS. But how's the customer aware that that's what they need, and that in that particular time period they're going to require that extra IOPS? Well, that's because of InfoSight and the data that we're able to immediately provide the customer. And that's going to allow them to save cost, because we can take that actual scenario and flip it on its head. Now imagine a customer that's provisioned a volume at, let's say, 30,000 IOPS, but they're only using 10,000 ever. They have that information. And because of InfoSight, they're immediately able to take a proactive step and say, you know what, I'm going to take down the performance of this volume and save myself some money. And I'm going to take it to maybe 15,000 IOPS just to give me a little headroom and call it a day. And again, this is instant. Not to mention, and I keep talking about cost. Cost is particularly poignant in the cloud. I've talked to many customers. This is a true story. We had a customer that took a wing of their enterprise and decided they were going to go cloud native. After 3 months, they were racking up on this particular cloud provider $500,000 a month. I mean, just think about that. $500,000 a month. Their world was shocked. They couldn't believe it. They were like, how on earth? And you know, then they came to us to ask, how is it that we can assist, right? Cost is one of those things that is, while all of the hyperscalers are taking steps to try to better report costs to customers in a way that is not just easily viewable, but consumable. There's so many moving pieces to a service in the cloud. There's, you know, you can look at, for example, AWS. In order to bring up a VM, you need to have a VPC, you need to have subnets, you need to have an internet gateway, you might even need to have a virtual private gateway. You need to have storage, you need to have the virtual machine itself that incurs cost. Look at all those little pieces, and several of those little pieces have a different line item charge. So not only is it difficult for customers to understand how much cost they're consuming in the cloud, but it's also very hard for them to consume the reports themselves. And what we're doing with InfoSight is we're able to immediately, at least from the storage perspective at this point in the cloud, we're able to provide them something that's not only easily legible, but also easily consumable, something that they can immediately go to, report, and see and plan for from the storage perspective.
So I have a similar experience of a customer that went into AWS, and they went into AWS for UAT test. That UAT test accidentally went live and became production. They didn't mean to. It's just that the application was developed there, and then all of a sudden they just staged into prod. And what happened was that they were then incurring roughly $200,000 a month fees. So it was a big shock to their system as well. And part of the reason why they bought our storage on premises was because when they did that, they could then have a view to move to Cloud Volumes in the future, and that gives them that mobility. So, okay, we're running in production here in the cloud, but if we're on Cloud Volumes, we can then replicate that data back with no data egress charges, and then we can flip that back around. So we can get that experience and that user set whilst reducing our costs. And what's interesting is in the industry right now, the people that are making the most money, except for the hyperscalers, are the people that are the consultants who are helping people save money in AWS and Azure bills, just to be able to give someone some visibility as to how much they're spending, where they're spending it, and how they can save this. InfoSight natively into Cloud Volumes gives you that visibility to at least understand, well, why am I paying this amount of money on stuff that I'm not even consuming? I should just be going and changing that down. And the great thing about InfoSight is a cloud service ourselves. So you don't run InfoSight, you don't install InfoSight, it's just there in our own cloud. And it's been running for 10 years, so it's an extremely resilient, but it's also an extremely high performance solution. And the benefit of that is we don't charge for this. Anyone that's a customer on premises gets this as part of support. You buy Cloud Volumes, you get a world-class support organization behind it, which is level 3 only, backed by Nimble support. But you also get the InfoSight experience. So you're getting that experience we deliver on-prem in the public cloud.
And then one of the final questions that I have, Diane, is around data protection. Obviously, it's important to, once we've gotten our data into these cloud solutions, that may remain, their integrity remain protected and stay safe. So can you talk us a little bit about what's possible for organizations that are looking to utilize the solutions for data protection?
Yeah. So there's several things that we offer from data protection. I'm also going to talk about things that we are looking at offering, since we've already talked about one, that kind of sweet spot backup, right? So we not only are able to offer, again, looking at what's available on the truck with enterprise data protection, we're able to offer immediately snapshots, right? We're able to immediately offer replication. That's not just on-premise. It sounds like I'm talking about an on-premises array, but the reality is I'm talking about the Cloud Volume service. We have customers that are not just using snapshots in Cloud Volumes, but because they want to be able to have the particular data local to another use case, as well as incorporate their data protection as part of it, they replicate from Cloud Volumes on-prem. And then they can spin up on-prem the data for, let's say, they have an analytics wing that wants to code local, right? Rather than coding from the cloud region that they're at. Right? So we're talking about 2 different regions at this point. So we're able to back up the data with snapshots. One of the things that we're also looking at doing with our Cloud Bank service, and this is just brainstorming and hopefully something we can launch in the future, is how do we leverage Cloud Bank Archive very much like we do on premises with Cloud Volumes. And that's something that we're researching now. And of course, once we have that backup, that sweet spot Goldilocks, that's still going to be an option. So for Cloud Volumes customers to be able to back up their data in the cloud and keep it in the cloud. So if they need multiple locations or sites of backup, or how about I say verticals of backup? That's the best way to put it, or tiers of backup. Rather than leveraging their on-premises site as an extension of that, they can just keep it all completely in the cloud, because they'll be able to leverage this backup service as well as the archive service. And that's for a cloud-first customer that really is ready to go cloud native and release their on-premises data center. Right.
So to add some color to that piece, the industry as a whole has always said that snapshots aren't backups. And I think a lot of us would also agree that snapshots do not replace backups. Snapshots, though, do absolutely complement the backup. If you can take a snapshot which has 100% data integrity, it has a complete copy of your data at that point in time, but it has no performance overhead by taking it, and you can take them every few minutes or every 30 minutes or every hour, and you can keep them in the station throughout the day, but restoring from them is like a one-click operation and it has no overhead and performance, you're always going to reach for that snapshot rather than reaching from a backup that might be 24 hours or 48 hours old. So with Cloud Volumes as a service, we can offer that snapshot policy and protection to be able to take instantaneous snaps, and they are literally like that. However, you can then restore them back with a single click, or you can clone them off and present them to a different cloud service. All the while, you're not being charged for a full duplicate copy of your data. So the data that you see within your snapshots, we use a technology called redirect on write from a snapshot perspective that allows us to be extremely quick. It also allows us to reduce that data, but also we only store change blocks of operation within inside of that snapshot. Therefore, we can take hundreds and hundreds of snapshots without duplicating the data time and time again, making sure that it's completely consistent. And therefore, you're only being charged for the change deltas inside the snap. You're not being incurring 200, 300, 400% of costs because you're duplicating the copies of data each time. And that's where, if you look at a backup provider, they will then look to try and dedupe that data because you're doing lots of full backup copies and then you're deduping it at the target level. With copy on write redirect on write snapshots, and with what we do, we're essentially not duping in the first place. So therefore, you're saving money. It's a lot quicker, and you can do instant restores from it as well. So it becomes a no-brainer why you wouldn't use them.
Well, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I certainly learned a lot. I think our audience did as well. As we start to wrap up, Diane, we'll start with you. Are there any final takeaways or next steps that you'd like our audience to take with them?
Yeah, so we are very proud of our Cloud Volumes service, and we do offer for customers that are interested the ability for them to POC the service itself. So if we have folks that are watching that are interested in learning more about Cloud Volumes, do not hesitate to reach out. It's very simple. Just go to cloudvolumes.hpe.com, and there's a more information option there that you can fill out. And the other option as well is you could contact your partners or your account teams for information and assistance with Cloud Volumes.
And Nick, same question to you.
I would just encourage to go and take a look at the website. There's a stack of demos available on YouTube. Diane's done some great demos for us for not just technology demos, but solution demos. So I'm running SQL in this environment, or I'm doing Cloud Native with Anthos with Google on this. So definitely go and check those out. There's also some webinars that we've done that are recorded, that are on our website, that again, you can go back and watch. But I would absolutely say, if this is something that's of interest to you, we do run 30-day proof of concepts. You will need some sort of cloud resource to connect this stuff to, but we're going to give you that cloud service from us complimentary for 30 days to go and try it out and play around with it. I think, and also depending on where you are looking and watching this from around the world, we're now available in 4 regions. So we're available in US East and US West, London, and also Dublin for the European customers. You're going to see more regions come online in the next 6 to 12 months. One in Asia Pacific will be in the coming months, especially. So the great thing is you can buy Cloud Volumes. It's the same flat price for all regions. So you buy you buy credits to load into Cloud Volumes. You choose what region you want to put your data. So you can have one purchasing arm purchasing Cloud Volumes for different offices or different regions around the world, with one GUI as one experience managing all regions.
Okay. Well, thank you guys so much again, Nick and Diane. Thank you again so much for your time. Please, again, like they said, follow up with your HPE contacts if you'd like more information. And we hope to see you guys around soon. And until next time, guys, stay safe, and we'll see you guys back here.
All right. Thank you.